When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello YouTube, and welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel. In today's video, we are going to be talking about Rhaenyra. She is one of my favorite characters within the entire book series, Song of Ice and Fire, and all the history and all that. She is one of my favorite characters. She's a character very similar to Cersei, like how we're going to talk about later on in this video. But this video is mainly going to be an analysis of her life and talking about everything that she goes through and stuff like that. So, yeah. Strap in and let's get into it. Before we get into the video though, if you guys would like to subscribe, like, and comment for more of this type of content, please do. It helps the channel grow and reach other people that might like this content. So Rhaenyra early on was Viserys' really only daughter, right? And this becomes a kind of an issue as we go down because Viserys with his first wife was not really able to have many children, only has Rhaenyra off of the first wife. So for a while, Rhaenyra is the kind of established heir by Viserys, and you have Daemon Targaryen, which is Viserys' brother, who is kind of sitting here going, in reality, he has a very good claim. If we look at the last council that had made Viserys the king, they favored the male heir. So Daemon's sitting here going, okay, he's still pretty well in line. He's either, in his mind, he's probably second in line. He can kind of overtake Rhaenyra's claim, which is eventually what ends up happening, which I think is kind of funny. But Rhaenyra continues on in her early life, just kind of learning how to be a good queen and stuff like that from her father, attending a lot of the council meetings and stuff like that. And really, early on, there's not a lot of conflict with Rhaenyra. Right? The problem starts really when Viserys remarries. He remarries Alicent Hightower, which at the beginning was actually a very fruitful relationship. Alicent and Rhaenyra seemed like friends and seemed fine, and then all of a sudden it just kind of started to flip. Once Alicent started kind of having children and all that, it just kind of flipped a bit, and we have this really interesting part where we see Rhaenyra dressing up in the Targaryen colors, so the black and then like the red and stuff like that, and then you saw Alicent wearing the green. And that's kind of how the factions got their name, right? You would see the blacks were the supporters of Rhaenyra. They would wear black and stuff like that, the Targaryen colors. And then you had the greens, which was like Alicent and like people that supported her, which would be the greens. So this kind of just had a bunch of tension for a while, right? Because you had Rhaenyra, who was still being considered the heir by Viserys. All these lords and from everywhere had sworn her fealty in her earlier years. And Rhaenyra legitimately should have been the heir. Now, another thing that comes up early on in Rhaenyra's life when she has to finally marry, when she's come of age, she gets married off to Rhaenyra Targaryen. Now, this is a very interesting decision because I'm pretty sure everyone in the room knows he's gay. Like, when they're having this discussion, right, the Maester's the one that brings it up, which is very sus. Watch my Maester conspiracy videos. Very odd that that's how that goes. A lot of these characters know that he is at least leaning towards men, right? And what ends up happening, and I've talked about this in a lot of videos this week because it's a very key point, because Criston Cole is a very influential figure when it comes on to later parts in the war and the lead up to the war, is that Rhaenyra and Criston Cole kind of have this conversation behind closed doors. We don't know what actually happened. We're kind of left to infer what happened. Now, for me, I think Rhaenyra more or less rejected Criston Cole. I think Criston Cole wanted Rhaenyra, and Rhaenyra just said, no, I'm going to do my duty. I'm a Targaryen. I can't be doing that. And Criston Cole then kind of was salty, felt disrespected because he just got rejected and all that stuff. And he, from there on, kind of just hated Rhaenyra. And Rhaenyra's marriage with Rhaenyra was not really a good one, which leads to kind of the next thing in Rhaenyra's life. Rhaenyra's first three children, really, in my opinion, are bastards. They're not legitimate. They're not by Rhaenyra and Rhaenyra, which is another video I've talked about earlier on in this week. So if you want to see kind of my more in-depth analysis of that, watch that video. But long story short, the first three children with Rhaenyra Targaryen don't have any of the Targaryen features, really. Like, don't have the eyes of the Targaryens, don't have the hair, don't even have really the, I guess, body structure of the Targaryens. So I think for most people, right, this was Harwin Strong was probably the lover of Rhaenyra, which makes a lot of sense, right? Rhaenyra was someone that didn't have a good relationship and is someone that was looking for male companionship in other places. Very similar to, again, Cersei, how I wanted to kind of, I don't want to mirror the two characters. I think they're very similar. Rhaenyra kind of goes to seek other male companionship because she's not getting it with her husband. Of course, he's gay, right? He's kind of like a Renly type character, and we see that with Cersei, right? Cersei gets married into a bad relationship with Robert, and looks for male companionship with her brother, which she was kind of already doing anyway. But again, that just continues. Now we kind of keep going through these years to the build up of the dance, and Rhaenyra kind of just, again, there's kind of a conspiracy that Daemon Targaryen actually helped kill Rhaenyra, because he kind of dies in a very weird way, as well as Daemon's wife also dies at a very weird time as well. So I think that there is very likely option that Daemon actually killed both Rhaenyra's husband and Daemon, his own wife, because if you look at it, Rhaenyra, during her later parts of her marriage, definitely had feelings, I think, for Daemon. And we even see that she was not afraid to seek other male companionship with Harwin Strong and all that. So I think Rhaenyra began to like Daemon and stuff like that. And we know Daemon was trying to get close with her even earlier on, because really Daemon saw that he was losing kind of his status, right? He was losing power in the line of succession, because as Viserys and Alicent had more children together, as well as Rhaenyra having children, his kind of claim kept getting lower and lower and lower. What is the best way for him to get back into power would be to marry Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra at this point was still named the heir, and this was his way kind of to just get back on top, right? And I think it makes a lot of sense. We see that he had the utilities to be able to kill them, right? Because he does this with Alicent's children and, the payback thing that we'll talk about a little bit later. But Rhaenyra, I think, wanted this to happen, and Rhaenyra and Daemon actually marry in secret. It's something Viserys would have never kind of agreed to, especially, Otto Hightower as well, and the whole small council. They definitely wouldn't have agreed to that. And what I think is interesting about this is we look at their relationship and their marriage. Rhaenyra, I believe, married Daemon more for love than anything, because what would she have gotten out of it? Like, yes, Daemon was a good fighter. He did, have like a spy network, and he had some of those utilities like that, but he didn't bring you an army, really. Wasn't, one of the more powerful lords you could have married at this point. So I think for her it was more of a love thing. Like I talked with Daemon, I think Daemon was looking for more of a power grab, but I think he probably did eventually develop some feelings for Rhaenyra. Just now, we're not sure how much. Now, around this time, we start to get to the point of the story where Viserys ends up dying. And the Greens kind of use this to their advantage. Rhaenyra is not in King's Landing. She is in Dragonstone. She's not made aware of this for, a little bit, right? The Greens get this time to kind of figure out what they're going to do, crown Aegon II, and kind of set up their plans, what they're going to do. And I'm not going to go fully in depth with what happens in the actual dance, because I think I want to stick with mainly Rhaenyra's point of view and stuff like that, and what was going on in her life. So I'm not going to talk about everything. But more or less, once Rhaenyra gets this, they crown Rhaenyra, and Rhaenyra sends out her children to kind of establish these alliances. They have the dragons. They're, messengers basically, right? And this goes well for two of them, but does not go well for her youngest with Harwin Strong. Also want to mention within this that Daemon basically has two children with Rhaenyra, again cementing that, his line would eventually take the throne. But yeah, getting back to this, Rhaenyra ends up, having one of her sons die, and this is kind of the first big loss for Rhaenyra, because Rhaenyra in this kind of, war is going to lose everything. Rhaenyra loses everything in this war. right? And I think it's, we talk about the dragons and stuff, but Rhaenyra as a mother is going to lose everything. Think about what kind of Catelyn goes through, right? Within the story where you really feel like she loses everything and it pushes her to make bad decisions like releasing Jaime. That's kind of how I look at Rhaenyra when it comes into later parts into this war and kind of the bad decisions she starts to make and the complete and utter trauma she starts to go through and why she starts to not trust anyone and we see her make really bad decisions. But at this point, she's already lost her first son, right? And eventually, she's going to lose two more in this war, right? And you see her kind of completely break down. And it just kind of messes with her. And we also, she also believes, right, that, one of her other younger sons also dies with the one with Daemon. Or one of the ones with Daemon, my bad. But she thinks he dies. He actually doesn't die, but she will never find that out. She will be dead by the time that comes back into play. And so at this point, she believes she's lost 4 sons when she's kind of in King's Landing, right? She's lost 3 to 4 sons. And that is a big thing that causes her to kind of go cuckoo, right? She, takes over King's Landing because of Aemond and Kristen Cole kind of being a little dumb, really. They get too aggressive and they march mainly all of their forces, their dragons, out of King's Landing, and Rhaenyra just kind of swoops in, takes King's Landing. Now, the problem with this is the treasury's emptied, right? Otto Hightower had basically moved the treasury into 4 different locations, and the crown as well is gone. So taking King's Landing is almost a little fruitless, right? Yes, you do kind of have the seat of power, but you don't have any of the riches there. Now, the good thing with this is, in King's Landing, Rhaenyra is actually kind of a hero, right? People applaud her. She's welcomed into the city because she was the darling girl, especially in her earlier years. She was the darling kind of the country. And Rhaenyra this is where we kind of see her break down, and this is where she loses the war. Her advisors, for one, were not the greatest at this point, increasing the tax, terrible amount of trying to make up, for the riches they lose. Bad idea. It just kind of turns all of King's Landing against you and people can't eat and all that type of stuff. Kind of similar stuff to what we see Tyrion say before the stuff that happens in King's Landing with Stannis and all that in book 2, where, as the people grow more discontent, it just gets even more chaotic. And we see that happen. So eventually we have the storming of the dragon pits. And I think this is really the thing that breaks Rhaenyra, as well as kind of being betrayed by the 2 dragon seeds. I think that, paired with losing really the last part of her dragons, I think breaks her. And she starts to distrust Daemon and Nettles and all that. And then she eventually loses Daemon as well, her husband, someone that she did love. She just loses everything. And at this point, she goes, okay, we're going to go back to Dragonstone and maybe just sit there and just, I don't know. I don't really know what Rhaenyra's plan there was. I think it was kind of just to sit there and regroup because King's Landing, she just couldn't reign there anymore. She just lost the people and it was not going well. Well, she gets to Dragonstone and Aegon II is already there. Already there. He's taken it. And because he was smuggled basically out of the city. And Rhaenyra, more or less, is fed to Aegon II's dragon. There was really nothing she could do in this situation, and at this point, she was just a broken person. The Rhaenyra that we get at the beginning of the story, and even into her younger teenage years, is not the character we have at the end. The character at the end is someone that I think is going to be mirrored with Cersei, especially in the later books. Right, because we see Cersei as the amount of emotional and traumatic experiences she's gone through with everything with Robert, and then you see Joffrey dying. I think we're going to probably see more of her children die in the next books, and I think we're going to get a direct mirror of kind of Rhaenyra, where Cersei just loses the people turn on her, and it's her inevitable downfall when Fagon comes in. It's going to be funny because both of them are probably going to go down to someone named Aegon, which is a really good mirror to both of those characters. And I think it's a really good idea. I think really where George came up with a lot of the inspiration for Rhaenyra was kind of a mix of two different characters almost, right? Where you have Cersei and Catelyn. I think a very strong mix of those into Rhaenyra. The one thing I won't say is I wouldn't say like she was as bad as decision making, because I think a lot of her decision making was actually pretty good till later on in the war, when I feel like she just started to kind of go nuts with all the trauma that she'd been through. And I won't say crazy, because I don't think she was crazy. I think she just had gone through so much at this point that it was very hard to trust do any of that type of stuff. But that was really Rhaenyra's life. And what you can say about Rhaenyra, though, is that her son Aegon III does become king, and that her line in the end does win the war, more or less. I talked about that in another video as well this week. Let me know what you guys think about Rhaenyra as a character. She's always been one of my most intriguing characters that I really love to, like, reread, right? I've read the Fire and Blood about 3 times, and I think I've read probably her section, the Dance with Dragons, that whole idea when Rhaenyra kind of pops up, probably about 5 or 6 times, just off of it's my favorite part of the books. And then also, doing kind of the video series I did before this and stuff like that. So I hope you guys all enjoyed this video. If you guys want to see more of these kind of character breakdowns, I was thinking about doing next week a like Otto Hightower and Alicent one. As well as maybe a Daemon Targaryen one as well. So let me know what you guys think, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.
If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention.